Hello, BookTube. We're at the next step in our Western Canon starter kit. And as a step, it's a doozy. And you've all known it was coming from the beginning. It cannot possibly share an installment with anybody else, and it needs the royal treatment. And of course, that step is Shakespeare. we're going to talk about him just a bit today, but I realized before I was making this video that one of the biggest problems with Shakespeare, and one of the biggest problems that we'll encounter talking with him in this series, is the huge cult of intimidation that has grown up around him in the last, especially 200 years. And it occurred to me, much though it goes against my nature, that a short video is probably the best way to go so that I don't add to that intimidation factor any more than I'm already going to. The problem with Shakespeare, there are many problems with Shakespeare, the problem with him, the main problem, is that he has fallen into the hands of schoolmasters. I'm not the first person to say this. Many people have very wittily and sometimes acidly riffed on that subject. And in this particular author's case, as in I would argue most authors' case, it does him only ill. For every one kid, that one kid, maybe you were that kid, I'd be willing to bet if you're on BookTube, you probably are. For every one kid who's forced to read him, Midsummer Night's Dream or something like that, in school, and falls in love with this incredible authorial presence, just falls in love with the language and the world and the wit and the seriousness of this utterly unknown author. If you're that kid and you fell in love, fine. Then that rote program of teaching him to people who aren't ready to read him worked with you. But my argument is that for every one kid like that, there's 1,000 kids who immediately come to think of him ever afterwards with a pang of horror. Oh my God, school. Oh my God, I had to read that. Oh my God, I had to write a 2-page paper on that, and it was awful. No, thank you. That's terrible. That's bad in any case. That's bad when it's my beloved William Dean Howells. That's bad if it's Edith Wharton. I've seen it happen with her. That's bad if it's anybody. It's especially bad when it's Shakespeare, who, for all his faults, may very well be the most gifted single author in the history of the world. It's especially bad when school is inculcating a negative reaction to that author of all authors. So I don't want to belabor that point by banging on about how great Shakespeare is, or how sublime he is, or how funny he is, or how necessary he is to be a well-read person. This is, after all, a starter kit. And the only problem here is that even in a starter kit, there really isn't any way to get around the fact that you have to read all of Shakespeare. You really do. You're going to want to. Once that cloud of intimidation or the association with drudge work is gone, once you can manage to free yourself from that, you're going to want to read all of this author. You're going to want to read everything in this great big book, the plays, the sonnets, and the poems. And you're going to want more. So the key here is not so much to recommend Shakespeare as it is to recommend getting rid of that cloud of intimidation and that association with schoolwork. So for this is going to be a little bit odd as a Western Canon starter kit. Of course, you know the names already of all the big Shakespeare plays that you should read. You should read them. You don't need me to reinforce that. This isn't like me picking and choosing my way through, the works of ancient Greek drama that we happen to have survived from the ancient world. No, you already know the Shakespeare you should read. And I wholeheartedly endorse that you should read it. No, my purpose for this video is going to be to encourage you to get rid of that cloud of work. Because there's no good in you taking King Lear down off the shelf if you're dragging that into it. It can't compete with that. It was never meant to. It shouldn't. Instead, what you really need to do, what a lot of people that I've met, so I'm generalizing here, what a lot of people I've met in my life have had to do with Shakespeare before they could enjoy him was to get rid of those associations. And fortunately, in 2017, you have more tools at your disposal to do that than any previous generation has had. In the past, when I've given a pep talk just like this one to people, often in the context of a Western Canon starter kit, in the past, what I've had to do was urge people to seek out local live performances of Shakespeare, which will do it even when the performance is bad, because you will be in the audience and you will immediately feel connected to the reason why Shakespeare wrote these things. These aren't novels. When you're in the audience and you can hear the actors breathing and you can hear them hitting the floorboards, you will suddenly feel a lot of what Shakespeare is doing. Now, it's true that later in his career he was writing dramas that were more verbally intricate because he knew that he was writing for an audience that was mostly indoors and that would be able to hear a lot more in a lot greater detail. And it's true that much later in his career, I think he was kind of moving beyond drama completely. He was starting to inch in other directions. The latest of his plays actually can be read better than the earlier of his plays. But it doesn't matter. He had the theater in his bones. So it used to be that in the past, I would tell people what you need to do to clear away the middle people and get at Shakespeare is go and find a local production. No matter where you live, there's bound to be one. And if you live anywhere near a major metropolitan area, there'll be many to choose from. But today, in 2017, you don't need to leave your room. I checked before I made this video. There is an absolutely staggering bounty of Shakespeare on YouTube for free. And I know that you have access to YouTube because you're watching me right now. On YouTube, there is a smorgasbord of clean, well-produced, free, entire Shakespeare plays that you can just call up on the big screen, call up on your phone, and watch, which is the way to do this. It's the way to do this. If you don't get that aspect of Shakespeare first, the drama, the immediate in-your-face drama, the directness of connection with the audience, if you don't get that, then the long stretches of unbelievably gorgeous verse and prose aren't going to work. They aren't going to do it for you, unless you're that one kid in 1,000. But for most of us, the thing that's going to get you first is being hooked on the actual floorboard drama of what's going on. A drama that Shakespeare evoked like nobody. So you don't have to wait anymore until your local stage crew puts on a play. You can instead do it on YouTube. You can watch these things on YouTube. And you can also listen to them, which is just about as good. I checked, and Audible has a ton of Shakespeare that you can listen to. And not only Audible, but there are plenty of other things too. LibriVox has the whole of Shakespeare. And that's important, because the reading it on the page, keep in mind, is the last way he expected these things to be encountered by an audience, especially an audience who never heard of him before, knew nothing about him. So, my advice to you is, before you settle on any of the plays that you and I both know you should read, and you shouldn't just read them, you should read them and reread them, you should know them. You should know them, especially if you are in an English language culture. Shakespeare is in your DNA. If you don't know Macbeth, if you don't know Romeo and Juliet, you're missing out on a large part of what your own culture is about, because it's built in large part on that. So the first thing you want to do is pick a play, any play, and see it. Call it up and watch it. As heretical as that sounds coming from me, that I'm advising you to see it before you read it, I am advising you to see it. Become extremely familiar with it before you read it, because the reading is going to throw you into the world of late Elizabethan prose that no one speaks it anymore. It's an alien rhetorical world, and it's better to come at that world fully armed, and then you can appreciate the beauty of it. So go to YouTube, go to LibriVox, go to Audible, encounter these plays in some way other than reading them on the page. Also, I mentioned this on this channel before, since I'm talking about a dramatist, I have to mention it again. Another great thing to do is act the plays yourself with your friends. And I don't mean putting on costumes and strutting around in your backyard. Just divvy up parts and speak it out loud. But that should come second. Encountering the vocabulary, the words, should come after you've encountered the actual stage production, the actual physical human presence that is the reason that Shakespeare wrote these plays. It's the thing that he was bringing to life. The sonnets as well are all narrated on YouTube, and wonderfully, some of them. So, so that is actually the heart and soul of this Western Canon Starter Kit. This chapter is Shakespeare, but I'm not going to list plays and poems and sonnets. I'm not going to do anything like that. You already know that. What I want to take aim at in this installment is the reason why you might not do that. I want to get rid of that reason, because once that's gone, you will find a treasure the like of which is almost unparalleled in literature of any country. I want that treasure to be yours, but there's no sense in you encountering it with some droning high school teacher in your mind. So we need to get rid of that first, and you have great tools to do it. Go and see a Shakespeare play. Pick one if you want, and watch 4 different versions of it, and then read it. And that's it. That is the Shakespeare chapter of the Western Canon Starter Kit. I know it's a bit odd. It's odd for the series, but I was thinking about it for a long time, and I realized there's no other way to do it. We have to get rid of that middleman first before you can even begin to appreciate Shakespeare. So do that, and then do all the plays, poems, and sonnets, and we'll see here in a very short time. We'll move on from here. It'll be multi-authors next time. We had to get Mount Shakespeare out of the way. So I'll end it here, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.